Well, I'm back, and today's going to be more of a discussion video. Recently has been a little tough and busy for me. My dog had passed away, which was very saddening, and I guess coincidentally enough, two weapons that were made to remember a guardian's dog are also getting nerfed. And I'll start by saying that I'm quite disappointed about this. Not Forgotten and Luna's Howl, the pinnacle crucible hand cannons, are getting some big changes, and what's resulting in my opinion, mainly a nerf. From what I've seen, I think the community is pretty split on this. You're either very much for a nerf on these weapons because they've been extremely dominant, or you're pretty against it because of whatever reason else. I'm on the side where I'm mainly against it, but I'll talk about my thoughts throughout this video. Let's start with why I like Luna and Not Forgotten. First and foremost, it has the 180 RPM precision hand cannon traits. They have vertical, perfectly consistent recoil patterns, low recoil, which emphasizes precision shooting and empowers a player to shoot and land their shots more precisely, improved airborne accuracy, perceivably lower bloom, don't know if this is true or not, but it seems to be. Overall, these hand cannons are just less random, more consistent, and like I said, empowers the player to land shots reliably if they have good aim. And these are significantly more consistent than any other hand cannons in the game, at least on controller or console, which I believe is the majority of the player base, because of these traits. I like that Magnificent Howl rewards precision, well-placed shots, and strategy or awareness. Landing 2 precision hits and a body without missing, in that order, rewards you with a very fast time to kill. And if you miss a 3-tap, finishing with 2 deliberate precision hits, without firing after the target dies, activates Magnificent Howl so you can 2-tap a target or spread very high damage output across multiple targets. Landing precision hits against the player peek shooting and using their cover well without missing can also activate Magnificent Howl, again to potentially 2-tap or transfer that high damage output across different targets, again only if you don't miss. Spamming shots will of course still activate Magnificent Howl for you sometimes, but you give up the ability to purposefully utilize Magnificent Howl to 2-tap players or again transfer that high damage across multiple targets. I also think Magnificent Howl as a perk promotes aggressive play because a player with Mag Howl activated has only a finite amount of time to make use of either, again, 2-tapping or again dispersing that high damage across targets. Again, I'm going to reiterate, all needing to be done without missing within that finite period of time. I also like that Magnificent Howl gives Not Forgotten and Luna the potential to counter shotgunners, allowing them to serve as a slightly more difficult to use alternative in the energy slot for the last word in the kinetic slot. The last word has a 0.8 TTK with 4 body shots, where Not Forgotten and Luna require 2 crit 1 body in that order without missing outside of shotgun range to counter shotguns, and obviously this opens up better options for kinetic snipers. And finally, I like that Magnificent Howl has the potential of dealing pretty good damage to supers or countering supers. It's one of the few perks or abilities in the game that you spawn with to at least have a chance at countering supers, which are very frequent and very powerful at the moment. Landing 2 shots on usually what is a highly mobile and evasive target allows you to have high DPS against them should you continue to hit said target without missing. So these are the main reasons that I enjoy Luna's Howl Not Forgotten. This was the whole allure behind the weapon to me, but let's talk about what exactly the changes to Not Forgotten and Luna are going to be doing once they arrive in Season of Opulence. Not Forgotten and Luna will be getting a base damage increase from 57 damage to 68 damage, as well as a decreased rate of fire from 180 RPM to 150 RPM. So essentially now the base functionality will have these weapons functioning in line with the 150 RPM archetype. Now, over a 15-second period, you'll be able to fire approximately 27 shots now with the new rate of fire and archetype changes instead of 30. So in small scenarios, in each tidbit of gunfights, it's really not that big a change to the rate of fire. Not Forgotten and Luna's will be getting an increased time to kill as a result of the archetype change from 0.67 seconds with 2 crit 1 body currently to 0.8 seconds with again 2 crit 1 body. Magnificent Howl will no longer deal precision damage. Currently, it's a 2.3 times damage bonus roughly, and I predict that it'll hit targets for 99 damage to the body, applying that 2.3 times damage bonus to the numbers that 150 RPM hand cannons hit for. Now we should mention that DMG published a tweet that kind of throws things out of line. It's a little weird. While I predict Mag Howl will hit for 99 damage, which we can assume can kill a target in 2 body shots up until 10 resilience, DMG, one of the community managers, made a tweet stating that these changes to Not Forgotten and Luna were meant to prevent 2-shot kills. This leads me to believe that either the damage buff of Magnificent Howl may be getting lowered, or there was some sort of miscommunication. I'm not sure, we'll have to wait and see. Finally, just as a small side point, the lower rate of fire and damage per shot with Mag Howl means this weapon will have less overall DPS in PvE. Again, it's a small point just for those that liked using this as a tool in PvE against tankier enemies, but honestly, the buff to base damage offers more potential, I think, for ad clearing, and still enough of a damage buff to be better than other primaries, so again, take that as you will. So now that we know the changes, now I'll tell you why I dislike the changes to the functionality of Not Forgotten or Luna. First and foremost, Magnificent Howl feels less rewarding. Magnificent Howl can still transfer damage, I assume, but does less damage and doesn't focus on precision shots. Magnificent Howl will do more damage than the current body damage bonus, but less than the current precision bonus, even against supers, further taking away emphasis from precision shots and allowing peak potential simply for hitting body shots. Controlling the rate of fire, focusing on pacing shots, and placing shots well rather than spamming to activate and use Magnificent Howl is less important now with the lower rate of fire. Currently, I usually fire lower than the 180 RPM, maybe around 150, 160 RPM, but mainly just fire at the rate of fire that I feel is necessary to ensure I'm landing the hits I need to without missing, even if it's lower than max rate of fire. Players who are only concerned with spamming or firing all the time at max rate of fire to luckily hit peak potential no longer have this sort of responsibility at all if the weapon still follows the 180 RPM bloom reset time, and can fire at the new 150 RPM max rate of fire without being punished and without any thought at all. In a similar light, capping the rate of fire on the weapon punishes a player who does maybe have the aim and ability in some scenarios to very quickly land the best shots possible. Conversely, if the bloom reset time changes to reflect the 150 RPM archetype, this could mean to land shots best, you might need to fire slightly lower than this, hurting the TTK in most average scenarios even further. Another thing I don't like, and I kind of mentioned this already, is that this weapon's now getting higher effectiveness without Mag Howl active, and peak potential with only body shots when Mag Howl is active. Now, this weapon's getting higher damage per shot without Mag Howl for better performance and higher damage output, similar to other traditional hand cannons, but Magnificent Howl, as much as it was always powerful without hitting headshots, it's never reached true peak performance without continuing to land precision headshots. And with these changes, simply landing body shots guarantees peak performance. The next thing I don't like is that the lower rate of fire caps the spam ability, if you will, but it feels redundant. I actually don't mind the lower rate of fire, because the lower rate of fire emphasizes the need for better placed shots, but I believe the incentive to place those shots well above all was already there with the potential of Mag Howl that I've mentioned already. Again, I still don't mind the lower rate of fire change because it does put more pressure on landing your shots, but it just feels redundant, I think. At the same time though, the lower rate of fire means potentially less time needed of your crosshairs to be on target and less emphasis on tracking, which kind of alters how you use the weapon a bit. Lastly, Magnificent Howl offers less on an individual kill. Essentially, this becomes similar to Thorn. The reward for deliberately hitting 2 crit and 1 body in that order is a 0.8 TTK, only slightly faster than that of Thorn, who can always achieve a 2 crit 1 body. I know it's slightly delayed from the burn damage, but regardless of order of critical shots you hit, or regardless of missing, you can get that 2 crit 1 body with Thorn. Overall, I think these changes to functionality are more beneficial, honestly, to someone who wasn't fully utilizing Magnificent Howl, rather than someone who was, by increasing the base functionality and decreasing the peak potential, both things that give less emphasis or need to activate and utilize Mag Howl. I like that Not Forgotten and Luna with their precision archetype have lower damage per shot than other hand cannons. because to me, this put more emphasis on utilizing Magnificent Howl to be competitive. I feel that both an archetype or RPM change as well as a Magnificent Howl change is just a bit too drastic for my liking, and I would have preferred more subtle changes if they're truly necessary. Now I'll talk about quickly why I dislike these changes because of reasons aside from the functionality of these weapons. Firstly, this nerfs one of, if the only, consistent and lethal hand cannon on controller. 180 RPM precision hand cannons bring a degree of consistency to the Destiny sandbox that I don't believe has existed much in the past. I mentioned this earlier. And the combination of consistency and potential lethality is something I'd like to see more on other weapons in the sandbox. I think that most controller players feel that 180 precision hand cannons are the only competitive options because of the consistency they bring to the table, and I'd like to see other hand cannons, and weapons in general, brought up to this standard rather than Not Forgotten and Luna being brought down. Next, I predict that Not Forgotten and Luna will continue to be used in the same frequency on controller or console as they currently are. Not Forgotten and Luna will, after the changes, have higher DPS, still some good potential with Mag Howl, but most of all, the same degree of consistency that no other hand cannon feels like they have by comparison. Maybe a well-rolled service revolver, but you gotta grind through RNG and get pretty lucky for that either way. If other hand cannons finally do get buffed to have that same degree of consistency as Not Forgotten or Luna, Not Forgotten and Luna will lose a lot of reason to be used and most likely will no longer be a top contender. And I think this is quite relevant because on M&K I predict that Not Forgotten and Luna will no longer be a top tier choice. Ace, The Last Word, and Thorn are hand cannons that are already considered as good and by some better than Not Forgotten. M&K proves that when all hand cannons feel consistent, they coexist with Not Forgotten and Luna as top tier choices alongside the exotic hand cannons and even alongside some well-rolled legendary hand cannons. Now I wanted to quickly compare Magnificent Howl and Not Forgotten and Luna to some other hand cannons and what they get. So Ace essentially gets permanent kill clip and a myriad of other perks, but we'll say permanent kill clip. Thorn gets a 2 crit 1 body standard, burn damage utility, and kill clip style potential. The Last Word gets a 0.8 second time to kill for only body shots for free, and Sturm, if we want to put it on this list, gets the potential of a 2 crit, 0.53 second TTK up until 4 resilience for the entire mag after any special weapon kill, not just Drang. Some legendary mentions are Kindled Orchid, which gets kill clip and rampage stacked for 2 crit kills and chainable 1 crit 2 bodies. Waking Vigil gets ricochet rounds, which is pretty much rangefinder and opening shot, as well as slide shot. Nation of Beasts can get kill clip and opening shot, and Spare Rations can get ricochet rounds, rapid hit, rangefinder, or kill clip, and sometimes a combination of a lot of these perks. Now, this is not even considering legendary weapon stats, and I know it's incredibly hard to get the perfect rolls, but perhaps some sort of way to forge rolls would increase the usage in these other weapons as well. In terms of range, which is a very important stat, thanks to Cammy, we have a great chart of where damage drop-off starts for different hand cannons. Not Forgotten, the more range-oriented version of Luna's Howl, finds itself only at the middle of the pack, starting to experience damage drop-off at 31 meters. Now, even though we're doing all these on-paper comparisons, you might be saying, well, even though there are all these bonuses to other hand cannons, why doesn't anyone use these hand cannons often? And for that, I go back to my previous point. I think that traditional hand cannons, mostly the 140 and 150 RPM archetypes, feel very random, inconsistent, and maybe even jarring on controller due to reasons I can't say I'm absolutely sure of. This, again, makes me advocate not for a nerf perhaps to Lunas or Not Forgotten as a starting point, but a buff to make other hand cannons feel as consistent as Luna and Not Forgotten currently do. Now I'd like to talk about some alternate changes that could have been made instead of the changes that are proposed and coming in Season of Opulence. Firstly, make other hand cannons feel more consistent on controller. I can't say this enough, I'd love to see this. Currently, firing at or near max rate of fire feels far too random, sporadic, and jarring, especially with consoles' lower FOV. And frame rate, of course. Controller players using other hand cannons can't compete with the consistency of both Not Forgotten in the hands of other controller players, or even if you're playing controller on PC, it's difficult to use other hand cannons against other hand cannons in the hands of M&K players due to consistency. I think it's important to mention that I'd like this change to be put in place even if any other change proposed on this list took place. Like, this is just something I want no matter what. I feel that the consistency of other hand cannons needs to be improved on controller. I want people to use other hand cannons because they feel great, and not because they feel the least worst. Another option would be to change Magnificent Howl to work with precision damage only. This allows us to maintain the very fast .67 TTK and the ability to transfer high damage across targets, but with more increased pressure of not only needing to shoot without missing within a short period of time, but also needing to ensure that all of those shots are headshots. Another change that might even work in combination with the previous one is to decrease bullet magnetism on Not Forgotten and Luna. Despite many of my key points, a key argument I think is that it's too easy to hit headshots, and as a result, activate Magnificent Howl with NF or Luna. And NF or Luna have above average aim assist, and well, in the case of Not Forgotten, it has top tier range. So as a result, I think decreasing either the aim assist stat or changing the range masterwork on Not Forgotten so you don't completely kill Luna's could be beneficial to make headshots slightly more difficult to achieve. Another change I wouldn't mind is maybe making Not Forgotten an exotic and keeping Luna's Howl as a legendary. And again, this could work in combination with previous changes I've mentioned. Not Forgotten's range boost appears to affect precision hit registration more than it does damage drop-off, and this makes headshots a little easier at range and with a higher rate of fire against targets at range. Making Not Forgotten an exotic prevents players from being able to get this added ease of use and versatility while pairing it with very powerful exotic heavy weapons, maybe the Chaperone even, or Izanagi's Burden. Finally, in Cammy's video on his thoughts, he mentioned that you could technically go full force into more nerfs to maintain overall balance, and this means bringing other results of power creep like 140 RPM snipers, the last word, ace, thorn, pulses, better rolled legendary weapons, etc. back down to be in line with Not Forgotten to keep it as a powerful option. Personally, I don't like this change at all, as it would fundamentally take away from many weapons' lethality and quote-unquote fun factor, and I don't think this change at all solves the feeling of inconsistency with other hand cannons on controller. So those are pretty much all my thoughts on the changes to Not Forgotten and Luna, but finally I just want to provide a quick little opinion of mine on Crucible Pinnacle weapons and the quote-unquote meta. I like that Pinnacle rewards are deterministic rewards made to perform best in the Crucible, obtained from the Crucible, and the same can be said for any other game mode's Pinnacle rewards. And they're deterministic rewards, so it means you know exactly what you're facing in PvP, because no random rolls. A big issue with PvP and the growth of PvP in Destiny, in my opinion, is the barrier to entry. Pinnacle weapons are a way for PvP players, or people wanting to experiment with the PvP in this game, to earn top tier weapons through playing just PvP. I think that a major complaint or issue with Not Forgotten and Luna is that not everyone has them, and I can't help but sympathize with that. I think of these weapons almost in a funny way as Destiny's version of the Halo CE pistol. But imagine if in Halo CE not everyone could start with that pistol. It'd be pretty busted. I'd support making Pinnacle PvP weapons even easier to obtain than they currently are. Although I would like it to still take ranks, I'd like them to feel more like a time commitment rather than a skill requirement for the weapons at 2100. I'd support this far more than a nerf to any of these weapons, and of course in combination with buff to other weapons to provide more viable options as well. As far as quote-unquote meta goes and the frequency of such, I believe there's always going to be a meta. There will always be a best, most optimal loadout or thing to use, and I think we can just hope for as diverse of a balancing as possible, and it's in Bungie's court to make those changes on a regular basis to attempt to create as much diversity as possible. Frequently running into people using the meta is something as a player I think I need to accept that there's nothing wrong with. Some people, maybe most, want to play and invest their time into being efficient and competitive and prepared for the most competitive engagements possible on a regular basis. There's nothing wrong with this. Although I, because of what I enjoy, may not like this, and you'll catch me kicking and screaming about it, I think it's important to be grounded and realize that this is just as valid of a method of enjoyment as anything else in the game. Using anti-meta or unorthodox strategies or just weapons for fun per se is on me as a player, and I think that it's important that I understand that I am most likely going to be in an uphill battle in some scenarios. The debate of casual versus meta or competitive is totally existent in other games as well. It sounds kind of nerdy, I know, but I play Yu-Gi-Oh! And occasionally go to locals for fun. I tend to, as I do in Destiny, enjoy playing more anti-meta or casual strategies, simply because I enjoy the strategy, aesthetics, or whatever makes it fun to me, and attempting to make it work against better strategies or players is fun for me. When I go to a local tournament to find 90% of matchups being against the best strategy in the game, I can't really complain about other people playing such strategy or deck, because I want to play something more casual or alternative to the meta. It's up to Konami, the people that make the card game, to release new cards, support for older strategies, and ban regulation as frequently or regularly as possible to keep things diverse and in check. And I'm saying this because I feel the same exact thing can be applied to Destiny with Bungie, so it's existent in other games as well, it's just not something exclusive to Bungie and Destiny. For reasons I said previously as well, I don't think Not Forgotten Luna is unhealthy for the game. They promote and reward what I think is skill and strategy, they still allow for interaction and engagement, and don't rely heavily on luck to determine any sort of significant outcome. Like I mentioned, I'd like to see other weapons brought up to newer standards, and in this case, the power of Not Forgotten or Luna. This doesn't just mean hand cannons either, this means things like the Mida multi-tool catalyst, but that's for another video. Anyways, I've kept you guys here long enough. I hope you guys enjoyed the video and my thoughts on the matter. If you guys agree or disagree, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. But I ask, please guys, let's keep it civil. Let's keep a constructive, good dialogue and conversation going. Anyways, again, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys later.
You're in the lead.